Hello everybody, it's Paige from the Helen Schuler Nature Center. This week in the Natural Leaders Project Home Eco Challenge, we're looking at ecosystems. Now this video is going to be all about the stuff and the systems. So actually what an ecosystem is and what makes it up. It's the Natural Leaders Project Home Eco Challenge. I had to move outside because it's so nice out. I couldn't just continue to do this in the porch. So basically last video we looked at, well, kind of the definition of an ecosystem, a couple examples of ecosystems, and then we talked about keystone species. And hopefully you all came up with a couple of examples of keystone species in your own home. This time we're going to really deep dive into looking at that definition that we kind of touched on last time. So today we're talking about the stuff in an ecosystem and the systems. So I had to put my sunglasses on. It's just too beautiful and nice out not to. So today, let's break today into two chunks, the stuff and the systems. Let's start with stuff. Generally, human beings, we like to categorize things. It's just a fun special quirk of our personalities. So often when we talk about the stuff in an ecosystem, we break it into two kind of general categories: living or biotic and non-living things or abiotic. So biotic things can be, well, there's all kinds of biotic things. It can be plants, so things like trees or shrubs or grass or flowers. It can be an animal, so things like invertebrates or reptiles, amphibians, mammals, fish or birds. And then there's all this other cool biotic stuff, things like bacteria and fungus and lichen and algae. The point is, living things are anything made up of cells. So alternatively, non-living things are anything without cells. So abiotic things in an ecosystem, those are the non-living things, we also categorize into maybe naturally occurring or human-made. So naturally occurring abiotic things in an ecosystem would be stuff like sunlight, wind, water, minerals, those kinds of things, dirt. Whereas the human-made non-living things in an ecosystem are stuff like litter, garbage, concrete, asphalt, stucco, a garage, buildings, roads, those kinds of things. So all of these things, both living and non-living, are constantly interacting with one another. And the systems are what actually allow them to do that. So if we look at my sit spot, and that's where I am right now, we can identify the stuff in this ecosystem. So starting with biotic stuff, that's living things. That would be me, the grass, these little tulips popping up out of the ground over here, the soil and the bacteria in the soil, what's in my compost is considered biotic, all of those different kinds of things, the trees, that little dastardly raccoon that I saw the other night that I'm really trying to make friends with, all of those other things. My little Chewy, although she's inside. So all of those are the living things in this ecosystem. Now, the non-living things would be the garage, the house, my composter, right? The rain barrel that I have, the gutters that actually transport all of that water, the sunlight. Those are all the non-living or abiotic things in my own little ecosystem back here. Boom, boom. All right, so now that we've talked about biotic and abiotic, your assignment in your notebook is to make two lists. On one side of a new page, I want you to write all the living or biotic things that you can find in your habitat. And then on the other side of the page, I want you to list all the non-living or abiotic things you can find in your habitat. Try to list as many as you can. Bonus activity, if you're feeling it, once you have a list completed, actually get out a skipping rope or a shoelace or even something as small as an elastic band for your hair and plonk it on the ground. Get really close and examine what's inside of that kind of rope circle. Little Chewy's coming for a little stroll. Don't you worry, everybody. She only comes out when I'm outside. And I keep a good eye on her, make sure she doesn't eat no birdies. Look at her go, exploring the yard. She's a little Chewy on patrol. All right, so sometimes it's difficult to actually figure out is this thing non-living or living? So I have like a little mini quiz for you. Number 1, do you think this is living or non-living? Poop. What do you think? Do you think poop is living or non-living? Well, poop, I hate to break it to you, poop is living. So we consider it to be a biotic thing because it's made up of plant matter and animal matter and bacteria. The second is a twig. This is one that I find people often get confused about. Maybe think of like a twig or like a dried up leaf on the ground that's fallen off of a tree. Do you consider the twigs and the dead leaves to be living or non-living? Think about that. Well, twigs and leaves are living, so they're biotic. Now, they might not be alive anymore, but anything that's like considered a biotic thing is either alive or was once alive at some point. Basically anything made up of cells. So this last one has fundamentally divided the nature center. Some of us think this last thing is biotic and some of us think it is abiotic. So I need you guys to like comment below, is a wooden fence or like a wooden door, you know, or the wooden siding on my house, is it biotic or abiotic? Would you consider these things to be living or non-living? If you said biotic, that makes good sense because it's obviously wood, it's made out of a tree, it has made up of cells. I mean, wood is obviously biotic. But then we get into a little like wishy-washy territory because, well, once it's cut up and maybe stained or painted, is it still like considered a living thing? Or at that point, do we consider it a non-living or abiotic thing? Has it transitioned into like the world of the abiotic? If it is living, that means like your home is literally made up of living things that are no longer like actively alive, but it's pretty wild to think about. So tell me, what do you think? Wooden infrastructure, like wooden fence posts, wooden doors, wooden siding, do you consider them to be biotic or abiotic? All right, you guys, so now that we've looked at the stuff in an ecosystem, all the living and non-living things at your home, now it's time to get deep. It's time to talk about the systems that connect all of these living and non-living things together. All right, so all of the living and non-living things in an ecosystem are connected by some pretty amazing systems. Now, I'm calling them systems today, but they can also be called things like cycles or processes or chemical exchanges. But for the purposes of just like making this a bit more simple, we'll call them systems. So examples of systems would be like the energy cycle. Sometimes we call the energy cycle the food web. The main form of energy exchange in our ecosystem is actually through things eating each other, right? So it starts with at the base level with producers, things like plants that produce food from the sun. And then all of the other organisms that come in and eat those plants or eat the things that eat the plants. And that's how energy kind of like moves through the ecosystem. So the energy cycle is one. You can also call that the food web. At the base of that, though, is obviously photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a really important process. It's a chemical process that introduces energy into the ecosystem. The water cycle, you remember that one. It comes down as precipitation. It flows down with gravity towards the lowest point. The sun catches it, adds energy to it. That water evaporates into clouds. The clouds move on the wind to another location. That's the water cycle. We also have weather cycles, and that's a bit more complex, but it's really just about energy in the atmosphere and how that energy interacts with things. We also have seasons, and that has a lot to do with our planet and where our planet actually is in its orbit around the sun. We cannot forget really important processes of cycling that include like the waste cycle, so how things decompose and how nutrients and energy are recycled over and over again into an ecosystem. Without recyclers, without decomposers, without like the waste managers, there would be no ecosystem. That is so important. And then, of course, there's the really, really important system of reproduction, or like the life cycle. So, for example, a frog's life cycle, the froggo starts out as a little egg. Wind's coming in. Wind's coming in, folks. It starts off as a little egg, and then it becomes a little tadpole, and then a froglet, and then a frog, and then it has more eggs, and the cycle continues. Oh, lest we forget the mineral cycle. Mineral cycle is how minerals kind of are cycled through the environment, often through erosion and the breakdown of different like mineral resources around the planet. Plants actually play a really important role in the mineral cycle because all those roots, as they're moving around through the ground searching out water, they actually help to break up minerals in the soil and break them down into smaller parts. Hey, Ju. One thing that's kind of crazy though is that actually like in urban ecosystems, human beings have introduced a bunch of new cycles. So you have things like new transportation cycles on land, air, or water. You also have like the introduction of new energies like fossil fuels and things like that, or solar, or wind energies. There are also like specific human waste diversion systems. We like collect all of our human waste and put it in like all new areas and use it for all new things. So it's pretty wild to think about actually how complex and how many systems exist in an urban ecosystem like this. But for the purposes of today, we'll kind of keep it simple. All right, so I'm going to show you an example of one organism, the cottonwood tree, and how many cycles and systems and processes it uses to connect it to the rest of the environment. All right, you guys, so enjoy this awesome still shot of a cottonwood tree in the Lethbridge River Valley. So what is the exchange between this cottonwood tree and all of the world around it? Well, first, it brings in sunlight to produce energy. This is, of course, photosynthesis. Its roots absorb water from, snowmelt or rain. But in the case of this one, because it's in the river valley, it brings in water from the river, which is actually beneath the tree right now. That's all part of the water cycle. It also takes up nutrients from the forest, which are there because of all the amazing decomposers in that ecosystem. The cottonwood tree also relies on the wind, which is a weather cycle, and floods, which are part of the seasonal cycle, to distribute its seeds. You see, cottonwood trees, they actually go to seed during flood season, and they produce these really light, fluffy seeds. And so when the tree goes to seed, the fluffy seeds like fly on the wind, and when they land, they actually land in this like really nutrient-dense silty soil, that was left behind from when the floodwaters receded. So on top of all of this, cottonwoods lower air temperature and humidity, which has an impact on like wind speeds, which is a weather cycle again, and when in larger numbers, obviously, trees have an impact on the climate. They also provide nutrients for animals like porcupines, which is once again part of that energy web. They provide homes for birds and raccoons and insects, and that all helps to support the reproductive cycles. And then their roots actually help to break up large rocks and things underground. Again, that's part of the mineral cycle. And that's just an example of one thing in this ecosystem. Look how much else there is out there. There can be hundreds, if not thousands of different things in an ecosystem. And each one, just like this one cottonwood tree, has a huge impact on everything else because of the cycles that connect all of these things, living like trees and non-living like sunlight and water and minerals. Okay, so now for part 2, I have a secondary assignment for you. Basically, we're going to take that list of biotic and abiotic things that we created, and now we're going to actually connect them using the cycles and processes and systems that actually bring those things together. Now, I'll show you what I mean by that, but the idea is we're going to take our neat and tidy lists of living and non-living things, and we're going to mess them right up by adding in all of the kind of tricky and messy ways in which they are connected to one another. By the end, I want to know, what does yours look like? Is it like a star shape, or is it a messy, like a black widow spider web? So we'll find out. I think mine's going to be pretty messy. And there's not actually that much in this ecosystem of mine yet. Keep in mind, you guys, we're going to be working really, really hard to improve the overall ecosystem health. In our yards, look, there's a little bug in my hair. Hey, little bud. All right, let's jump inside. It's getting too windy. Let's do this inside. All right, so I'm here inside on my workspace, my dining room table, and I just gotta say, boop, 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 boop. Look at this. This is my sheet. Da-na-na-na-da-da-da. So I have my biotic and my abiotic, and now down here I have like my little systems list. So these are all the systems I came up with. These are the ones that are in the worksheet. So we have the food web, which I'm making orange. The water cycle, let's bada bing bada boom. Let's make that dark blue. Whoop. Okay, I won't actually make you listen to me name all the colors and where I'm putting them, but suffice it to say I just added a different corresponding color to each kind of cycle because that's how my brain works. My brain works in colors. But for now, enjoy this sped up motion. Shiggity bop, she's making a key. Look at those hand gestures. Okay, I forgot a cycle, but it's a good thing I have this little extra spot here. I'm gonna make it dark green and call it photosynthesis. Okay, so photosynthesis is a great one to start off with because it's pretty simple and straightforward. You know, sunlight connects to plants in your ecosystem. But from there, I want you to go through all of these different systems and see how are the biotic things maybe connected to one another, and then maybe how are the abiotic things connected to one another. And then start like jumping all over the place. How are the biotic and abiotic things connected? What systems bring this all together? You might think that this is pretty simple or straightforward or that you already kind of know, but the point of this activity is to start like asking yourself some tough questions and kind of figuring out how actually interconnected all of this is. As you can see, over the course of this, I added a bunch of stuff to my lists because I started seeing, oh wait, I forgot about this key player. And you know, going through this process kind of helped me. The point is that this activity is going to make you keenly aware of your home ecosystem. All right, so do as good a job as you can. All right, you guys, so I'm just going to sit here and finish my awesome, wild, like systems map. The point is it's supposed to be kind of crazy and messy and difficult and weird. And the idea is that that's what an ecosystem is. It's really complex interconnection of all of the stuff in an ecosystem, the living things and the non-living things, and then the systems and processes and cycles that connect all of those things together. All right, you guys, so it looks like I forgot to film an outro. So here's a picture of Chewy. I'll see you guys in the next video where we'll talk about ecosystem health. See you later.